Om Sadashiva Samarambam Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Parantam Vande Guru Paramparam Om Om Shanti 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 Om Namaste and welcome to our Q&A session based on the class on the unfoldment of the verse Vivekachudamani that we do on Thursdays. So I have a few questions or comments from Dave, so we can begin from there. So he says, can Jiva assign the ego a role since it needs one? So the first question here is, can the Jiva assign the ego a role since the Jiva needs one? And then he goes, the role of witnessing awareness in Nitya as a means to realize Satchitananda, or I am that. So the question here begins with the assumption that there is a Jiva and there is an ego, and the Jiva may assign a role to an ego, you understand? But the thing to understand, Dave, is that the Jiva is the ego, you understand? This ego, which is a phenomenon of this association of consciousness with Maya, and then with the object, with the three bodies called the human Jiva. So it shines in the subtle body of the human Jiva, and it produces this entity. It's nothing but the ego. It's nothing that intellect of the Jiva, the mind of the Jiva, this mind of ours that we experience, that allows us recognition and discrimination and determination, this intelligent kind of mind we have, cognitive process, This is the ego, you understand? The ego is this sense of I am, which is under the impression, under the assumption that this I am refers to the body-mind complex. Okay, so the Jiva is this I am thought associated with the body-mind complex, which believes that I am the body-mind complex. This is the Jiva, which is nothing other than the intellect, which is nothing other than the ego. In Vivekachudamani, Shankaracharya just he presents the intellect as the ego. Why? Because this ego is nothing but this sense that I think my thoughts, and I determine, I decide, and I do. So this combination of cognitive kind of processing, that I think, I discern, I decide, and I do, is the Jiva, is the intellect, or is the ego. The ego, the I under the spell of Maya, which firmly believes that I am my body-mind complex, I am my mind, and my storage, my memory system, my feelings, my emotions, you understand? All of this is what constitutes the I am, because this I is associated to all this experience by which it gets defined. You understand? This I am of the Jiva is the ego, is the intellect. And the more refined this intellect becomes, the better and the more efficiently this intellect, this ego, he may process this discrimination proposed, presented by Vedanta, to the extent that it can understand that the nature of the ego, I, which is the inferior I, or the I under the spell of avidya, the nature of this small I is the big I, you understand? But the whole process of searching and seeking, the seeker of moksha, is all of the time is done through the ego, the Jiva, the intellect. And the intellect needs to be further and further refined until it can understand that the Jiva the nature of this jiva is not limited. The true nature of this jiva is not limited by the body-mind attributes. You know, the true nature of this jiva, this phenomenon, which nothing but reflect consciousness, the true nature is consciousness alone. And consciousness is of the nature of limitlessness and fullness and completion. You understand? So all of this, the entire process, happens through the ego, through the intellect. And the doer, the inquirer, the seeker, ego, the ego is seeking, and it keeps seeking, and he keeps projecting this enlightenment, or this moksha, or this Satchitananda, or this Brahman. It keeps projecting on something which is about to happen at any time, or some experience, or something other than oneself. You understand? So the whole process is the ego trying to survive this Vedanta inquiry. Vedanta inquiry is going to kill the ego, and the ego wants to survive. And wants to say, like, okay, I'm going to become the super enlightened one, and I'm going to feel complete and satisfied, and people are going to pay respect to me and give me, flowers and donations or whatever, anything. Those are all the ego that is still kind of believing that this Brahman is something other than its own very nature. Okay? So there is no difference between the jiva and the ego. Therefore, the jiva cannot really assign a role to an ego, because the jiva is the ego. But this jiva, this intellect, it has to develop karmic merits to the extent that it comes in contact with the scriptures of Vedanta. And then once it gets to the scriptures of Vedanta, it begins this process of education, training, until it somehow develops purity and subtlety or refinement of intellectual power to understand its true nature, because it's very simple, but yet, it's subtle. The intellect needs to become subtle. And then what is the assignment that intellect should do, should present to itself, The intellect should say, okay, now I got in contact with the scriptures, understood it, it makes sense, and then the assignment that I give to myself as the jiva ego, the intellect here, is to cultivate, purify, and maintain a sattvic, pure, discriminating mind. So I want this refinement, intellectual refinement, because I want to understand my nature as that which is not limited at all. You understand? So this is the assignment that somehow the intellect or the ego needs to do, to present to itself. It's nothing by now I got it, and now I'm serious about this, Now I'm serious about that. I understood that nothing else is going to really bring me the satisfaction I'm searching and seeking. So now I'm going to just become serious about, my relationship with the scriptures until I develop this doubtless self-knowledge. So this is the assignment, but it's assignment that the ego has to give to itself. That the intellect has to take it on and say, enough. Okay, enough of playing around. I have been playing with tools for my entire life and so on. And now I'm mature, and I'm serious about, realizing my true nature, because it's the only way to live this difficult life as a body-mind complex. It's bound to die in time, you understand? So it's more on those lines. Can Jiva assign the ego role since it needs one? Yes, the best role. We play many roles in life. A father, a husband, a son, an employer, an employee, and so on. So we have all these roles, but the most important, the most fundamental role that the ego should assign itself to is the one of self-inquiry and spiritual elevation, spiritual growth, spiritual development. This is the best game in Tao. This is the highest kind of desire one can have in life, in media, you understand? And it's there only for very rare individuals that came to that degree of maturity. You understand? This is the role we want to play. We want to be a seeker of moksha, a seeker of freedom, knowing exactly well that I'm already free. Then what I'm seeking the certainty of self-knowledge, the confidence of self-knowledge, you know. So I get that by killing, by liquidating all doubts I have in respect to my own real nature, you understand? So, and then I want to, this is my assignment, is to develop this doubtless self-knowledge, this hard and fast self-knowledge, you know, which is the knowledge regarding my true nature as limitless consciousness. You understand? So this is the best thing to do in life, and it's available to very, very few individuals, Dave. And you should be happy that you seem to be one of them. Yes, it needs one, And the ultimate assignment is the one of self-inquiry and the pursuit of moksha. This is the ultimate assignment. So is it a witnessing awareness in media? No, you cannot witness, you cannot objectively know and witness awareness or consciousness. You know, the assignment is more like understanding that I am awareness in spite of media.
In spite of, yeah.
In spite of media, awareness is that shining this apparent order of reality in which duality seems to be a fact, you know, and has to question duality until it understands that the nature of this I is consciousness, and the nature of everything is consciousness and consciousness alone. So it's a question of not witnessing awareness in media, but realize my nature as awareness in spite of the superimpositions of names, colors, and forms that appears within my consciousness, my awareness all the time, right? Any questions regarding this first part, Dave? Or any contributions from anybody else, or any inquiries, further inquiries?
Well, I'm just thinking, like, you make this assignment, you're there. I mean, you're understanding, you're working, you're practicing, and then I have to think about letting go of expectation. I go back to karma yoga again, like I almost always do, and letting go of expectation. Like, my life is going to be wonderful and perfect and sattvic, and it's just one, you know, only good things are going to happen to me. And I have to let go of that. That's not the way it's going to be. I'm not going to be the most popular person in the world. I'm not going to be, you know, able to solve world peace or feed or, you know, anything. I'm just going to be the best I can be, and then follow my dharma, right?
Yeah,
and,
no, you're gonna be what you are, then, because there is still confusion about your identity. You're gonna be just limitless consciousness. You understand? It's a shift of identity. And your jiva as a bonus, it gets the benefit of being further purified by this light of self-recognition. And then your jiva becomes more sattvic, more balanced, more friendly, more loving, and as indirectly, as a byproduct, people are going to appreciate your jiva more, much more than before. But this is all byproducts. The goal of the ego should not to be survive as a popular, adequate, and wise ego. You understand? The purpose of this self-inquiry is to kill this misconception of the ego, you know, as an independent individual who wants perfection. The jiva is going to die limited. You understand? And the only freedom is to understand that the jiva is in its true nature consciousness, and consciousness is limitless. You understand? So it is a fact that there is great benefit for the jiva self-knowledge. Otherwise, nobody would go for self-knowledge. You understand? But the seeker of moksha has to keep in mind that my goal is not the benefits for the ego. My goal is the truth and the truth alone. You understand? even if that could bring about the destruction of the body-mind construct, but I need to be ready to pay any price, even if that would make someone to live a poor life, rather than a luxurious life and so on. So we have to keep in perspective what is self-knowledge, what's the ego. The ego is the tool, the ego is the agent, this self-recognition of consciousness about its nature in spite of nature, it occurs only through the ego, through the intellect of the seeker of self-knowledge, understand? So this ego is there, but the ego has to understand that what she's seeking is its true nature, which has nothing to do with the self-image that one develops about oneself, the idea of being great, of gaining love and respect and validation, appreciation from others. All of those things are irrelevant, although as a side effect, as a byproduct, the jiva with self-knowledge becomes more sattvic, more wise, more balanced, okay, and more lovable. But this is a, it should not be, this should not be the motivation in the mind of a true seeker of moksha, you understand? The motivation should be like, I want to know the truth, I want to know who I am. I know that there is a benefit there for the jiva, but this is not the case. Otherwise, what happens? In the end, the ego gets the self-recognition, immediately it co-opts the self-knowledge, and then he dresses himself up as the super enlightened one, and then he falls into ignorance again, So you understand the subtlety.
I think I do, and it just kind of goes back to me. It's like this whole idea to get that burning desire.
Yeah.
That burning desire really becomes the driving force behind discrimination and discernment and the four Ds.
Yeah.
But the desire becomes ultimately that's what's
Yeah,
motivation.
and you see, every desire we have, it has its own fragrance, its own elements to it, feel to it, But more important than the desire, the label of the desire, are the motivations behind it, Because a lot of the people may have a very, very intense desire for moksha. But what if behind this desire for moksha, there is a motivation of becoming powerful, famous, and therefore having the ability to attract, manipulate, and gain anything that one wants, you understand? So this burning desire, it has to be not only intense, but it has to be pure if it is to really work, benefit the jiva, so that it transcends this ignorance, and benefit others. It has to be intense and also pure in its motives, you understand? Is everyone following? This is a very nice subject because the ego, this intellect, it always wants something for itself. You understand? It wants to survive. And sometimes it's, Ramji often puts that self-knowledge, self-recognition, self-realization should have the power to cancel the sense of doership, ownership, authorship. You understand? So cancel this sense, I am the one thinking and determining, deciding, doing, and reaping the fruits of my actions, controlling this sense of doership is the ego. And this ego, it does not die that easily, It dies hard, as a title of movie we had long ago, So this ego has a certain power to somehow resurrect again and again, and we need to watch it. We need to watch it. And I'm talking first-hand experience, you understand? Because I have to keep an eye on my ego myself. There is always an ego. There is a teacher's ego. There is the ego of the wise, and then the ego of the highly evolved spiritual seeker, So you have to put this ego to check again and again so that it's under control. You say, okay, you were just an agent here, but never allow the ego to start claiming any merits, because it can be so subtle, Dave. I have been looking into these things lately within myself. I mean, overall, people believe and they give me the feedback that I'm a very humble person. But I have to keep an eye because here and there I see some impurity, surfacing in terms of this I that, oh, I appreciate this, I appreciate that, I'm wise now, I'm this and that. So it has to be kept in check all the time because it is our human nature is this I am the body mind complex, and we interact with the world through this I am body mind complex. And again it has to be kept, like Ramji says, with when you have a dog, you have a short leash. How you say that?
A short leash? Leash?
Yeah, leash. Yeah, a short leash. You never give much room for this little dog. You understand? You have to keep it under control. Otherwise, it starts just tripping, and then the next thing you see, it's just taking advantage of Ishwara's wisdom. After all, it's all Ishwara's wisdom. If Ishwara and bless some of us with this knowledge and with more mental, intellectual clarity and so on, it should be you put for good service, for the service of the field, of others and so on. But we see a lot of people who somehow are blessed with this sort of self-recognition or self-experience, or howsoever you want to call, and they use whatsoever wisdom they gain for self-benefit. So those are the impurities of the ego that needs to be kept to check all the time. Instead, I mean, this purity of the ego is a work in progress that, to my understanding, there is no end to it. And when we look into our recent history, I think that one of the most pure souls that maybe that we have come to know was Ramana Maharaj. And Ramji says that maybe another one, which was the most pure soul, the really beautiful ego, a ego that no longer thinks that there is something here for me, therefore I'm doing something for my own benefit. Ramji used to say that Swami Vedanta was the most pure, beautiful soul he ever saw. So these are role models for us. We want our ego to crumble until we don't have any self-interest, self-vanity, or any of these notions that, I am the one, and I want this, and I want that, and I want respect, I want, it's a never-end project, and we should take these beautiful souls as role models so that we can keep evolving, growing, elevating ourselves until we become a saint-like individual, and for as long as our karma unfolds. So this is the goal of our spiritual growth. And somehow self-recognition is an stage, it's an intermediary stage, station in this process of evolution. It can easily be co-opted as well by the ego.
And I'm thinking you've given a couple of examples of models, but those are people who are teachers, and like models of people who are not teachers. And I'm thinking like Gandhi, for instance, as a model of a person who's not I mean, he was a teacher, but it wasn't his profession. Let's put it that way. And thinking about other people who, so we don't have to be in the teacher path. You don't have to become a teacher in order to be, to know or to live in self-knowledge.
Yeah, and they don't even need to be self-realized, Dave. A lot of these people, they are born with a sense of Dharma, which is so strong. Their lives is a demonstration of just doing things for the sake of the total, for the benefit of the total. It's a life of sacrifice, for the good of society. And many of these people, they are not self-realized, but they have this incredible attitude of giving, acting from a standpoint which is not self-interest, but it is the interest of the Dharma field. So you find everything, you find people like these who are saints, are sages and saints, but not self-realized. And then you find people who are self-realized, who are far from being a saint, or a sage. So you find everything though. So the second part of Dave's message here is the ego identifies with suffering. It needs suffering to exist. So this is an interesting statement. He's equating the ego with suffering, okay? Because we understand that this sense of I am the body-mind, and therefore I am limited, and I am incomplete, and I am inadequate. It's the source of all suffering we have, all anxiety and fear and desires. Everything is born out of this misidentification as the body-mind. You understand? So the ego, once it identifies with suffering, it needs suffering to exist. So this is an insight into the psychology of suffering vasanas. So if we develop suffering vasanas, and then we start wrapping those suffering experience to make up our identity, our personality, and then we need these suffering results of actions of karma, you understand? To keep feeding and maintaining and keeping my personality, my sense of identity, intact. So this is something on those terms. The ego identifies with suffering. First, the ego identified with this mistaken notions regarding its own true identity, identified with these notions that we gain from previous births and we gain from society, this ego, it suffers. And then it goes into a cycle that one's personality is all around this experience of suffering. And those people that sometimes you come in contact, in media, they start complaining, telling others about how much they are suffering and I'm having this problem in life. These are people that are really, they're totally defined by suffering. Instead, there are some other entities or jivas that they have uplifting personalities and they identify themselves around happiness and positive thinking and beautiful emotions. So it depends on the nature of one's intellect or mind or subtle body, you understand? So the jiva, it identifies with suffering and they need suffering to exist. So it's just what I said. If the personality is properly designed around suffering, it's going to be locked into this loop, of more suffering so that my personality stands intact, and then people start coming and say, oh my God, you are so negative. I say, what? I'm not negative. I'm a victim of the universe, You know what? My mother did this to me, my father, my neighbor, blah, 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 and then they start complaining again, you understand? So depend on the nature. So we need to develop a kind of a good identity as a jiva as well, a positive, a positive kind of identity as well, personality. Because if we are too negative, it's a little bit more difficult to develop a balanced mind, a sattvic mind, because the mind is too depressed with suffering. Suffering depresses the mind, So we need to find a mind that's not too excited, it's not a super ego, but not too depressed, something, that can allow us to develop this mental equanimity or balance to go and do this work. So let go of suffering, then no suffering, no ego. Yes, this is easier said than done. So the person who is identified around suffering, and then you say like, oh, this is just your ego. So drop drop the ego, drop the suffering. All of this is easier said than done. It requires great, great, great wisdom, spiritual wisdom, to rebuild, to redesign one's personality. We need to begin cultivating. I mean, first we need to gain karmic merits, and then begin cultivating, developing good attitudes, good mental, emotional attitudes, good vasanas, and then gradually in this process, and then we have the tools that allows us to let go of this suffering ego. But then you have to let go of the happy ego as well, So the ego is the problem here. Understand? So howsoever it somehow it defines itself, it's going to survive. But it's better to have a happy ego than a suffering ego. It's much better, you understand? So suffering ego is a very tamasic kind of state, mental state, and it needs to be converted into a kind of rajasic personality so that gradually it can be converted into more sattvic and balanced personality. Anything about that, Dave, or anybody else? So can we identify ourselves if we have more suffering ego, a happy ego, a balanced ego? So this is something that we should always take personally and find ourselves within the context of these teachings of Vedanta. No?
I keep thinking, like, my question, the underlying thing is that my ego needs to find a role for me in all of this. Like, I need someplace to reside, and it's like defining that role. And at the same time, that's dualistic. I mean, it's counter to the ultimate, knowledge or self-knowledge or realization. And but at the same time, my ego needs a role, something to sit in, at least as I'm making this journey.
Yeah, definitely. So depending on the nature of this ego, we need some noble work to do so that we can raise, we rise, or we need a noble kind of assignment role. So there is nothing more than this spiritual inquiry, this spiritual growth, elevation, or knowledge, you understand? So if you want to give a role, a definition, or a purpose, or a character to your ego, keep it focused on the highest kind of human pursuit, which is the pursuit of spiritual wisdom and self-knowledge and moksha, you understand? So, but it's easier said than done, Dave, and you know that. Why? Because the ego is still there being fed from a lot of ignorance that still sits in the causal body, and it keeps popping up in the conscious mind of the jiva, giving the jiva this good idea. Oh, now I need to begin doing this project. Now I need to do that. I need to, extroverting them. And so this is just vasanas that are still there, pressing the ego, the intellect, to remain extrovert and hooked up to the world, trying to solve this existential problem called the human suffering. So we need again and again to come back and get more and more serious and intense on this work, so that these ignorant vasanas can be more easily identified, and neutralized before the jiva gets into this, all these projects of going out there and start doing things under the name of philanthropy or anything. No, I'm going to save this, I'm going to save nature, I'm going to open an institution for this and that. Whatever we want to do, we need to understand the motivations of this ego, because the best thing we can do is to save ourselves from this ignorance, because as Ramji likes to say, at least it's going to be one less ignorant person in the planet. If nothing else, it's already a benefit to the planet, right? And then on top of that, one wise person can also have a positive impact in his or her environment, So the ego is full of tricks. So what you want to do with your life, it depends on your wisdom. And your wisdom will grow, according to its potential, its possibility, its maturity, its It's growing, 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 and in one's dedication, into keeping the mind associated with this spiritual wisdom revealed by the Lord Ishvara to us, But distractions are all around the place. And the ego has always find some good ideas to engage with people, things, place, situations, and events, projects, and so on.
I'm struck by the analogy of Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita with the reins on the horses.
Yeah.
And now Krishna is, why he is the charioteer, and why does he hold the reins and not Arjuna? So I'm struck by the symbolic nature of that thing. And it's like, oh, I think I'll just go back and read the Bhagavad Gita again.
Yeah, I mean, this goes back to one of these aspects of Vedanta. Vedanta presents the qualifications, and among the qualifications there are the disciplines, sixfold disciplines, and these disciplines are nothing but a control of these five horses, which are our five senses, So there is more to it, You have to control the five organs of actions, the five organs of reception, and then you have to control your emotions, your thoughts, your intellect, You have to your mind, your thought process. So all this discipline is called Vipassana Yoga, and helps us, if you do it a few hours a day or a few minutes a day, it helps us to keep these horses under control. Otherwise, they just go and they start marching in the wrong direction, Okay, and then Dave goes on saying that samadhi is a discrete experience, like Anandamaya Kosha. It's fine to experience it with the understanding that it's neither is self-knowledge. Let me read it again. Samadhi is a discrete experience like Anandamaya Kosha. It's fine to experience with an understanding, neither is self-knowledge. Yeah, so this experience that we gain from Anandamaya Kosha, or these states of samadhi, or experiential fullness and satisfaction and bliss and so on, and peace and love, all these are experience that, as we know, are nothing but the byproduct of a sattvic mind, And when the self with consciousness shines in a sattvic mind, it produces those very beautiful sensations, feeling, experience of satisfaction. But this is not self-knowledge. Of course, it's not. Why? Because it is a state. A state of what? Oh, it's a state of consciousness. No, there is no state of consciousness. There is only mental states. Consciousness is stateless. It is free from states, okay? It's that which never modifies to experience. It's always the same. Consciousness is shining regardless of the state of the mind of the individual jiva. It's going to shine regardless of our mental condition. So it is it's fine to experience, but it's important to understand that this is not self-knowledge. And why it is important? Because otherwise we get hooked up and we get stuck in this sattvic experience that is a different kind of chain, I'm going to be bind to sattva, stuck in sattva, stuck with this experience. And therefore I need to again and again to reproduce that experience, because in those experiences I feel relatively and temporarily free. So freedom is a freedom which is only possible by the understanding of one's true nature as free, limitless awareness, consciousness. That knowledge in respect to my nature, which is free and limitless, this is moksha. Understand? Which is not an experience, but it's an understanding / knowledge that somehow sets the mind much more balanced around sattva. You understand? Again, this is a byproduct. This is a bonus. It's not the goal, because self-knowledge or moksha is not nothing about my mental state, but it's understanding that I'm not my mental states. You know, I'm not samadhi. I'm none of these mental states. I am consciousness, and my nature is freedom and limitlessness. Understand? This is only possible by the means of knowledge, and again, this knowledge as a byproduct, it somehow established the mind balanced around sattvic, which makes the intellect or the ego more wise, you understand, more clear, more focused, and so on, with better insights into the nature of reality, and so on. All of these are side effects of this self-knowledge. Yes, samadhi, in none of these Anandamaya Kosha's experience is not self-knowledge, because they are temporary. They are limited. They have some defects which are inherent to them. Some way stop on the way to realize that the self is Satchitananda. It may give us a glimpse of the self. No, it's not really that. You know, this experience, they don't necessarily give us a glimpse of the nature of the self, although one is going to be experiencing one of the aspects of the self reflected in a sattvic mind. One is going to experience well-beingness, peace, you know, tranquility, lack of desires and fears. So all of these experiential phenomena of the mind in these states, it makes up what? It makes up the perfect mental condition for doing our self-inquiry. You understand? So this is the platform in which we should be doing our self-inquiry. And people in the yoga, in the world of yoga, they stop there thinking that that is the end, an end by itself. You know, no, it's just I'm preparing the soil. Now I can plant my seeds of moksha. And if I prepare the soil again and again, Mark does a lot of cultivation of organic permacultures and so on like that. Imagine that if he keeps preparing the soil, he has a property there in Spain. For the past 20 years, he's preparing the soil, and he's never satisfied with the soil, because the soil could always be better. And he never plants any seeds, you understand? So he's never going to enjoy the fruits of this prepared soil, of this work. So we need to purify the soil to a certain extent and start planting the seeds of self-knowledge and moksha. You understand? Again and again. There is no such a thing of 100% purification, intellectual, mental, emotional purification. We need to purify a little bit, and then again and again, you know, and then plant these seeds of self-knowledge.
And that's okay.
Yeah, it is okay to have this experience of samadhi, but most people, and Ramji says that, most people that realize the self, they never had a Nirvikalpa samadhi experience, you understand? They don't have that kind of vasana. That kind of vasana is experiential vasana. Most people that realize I am Brahman are people with a knowledge vasana, not with the sattva experience vasana, understand, or mystical vasana, or samadhi vasana, you understand? Experiential vasanas. No, it's people who have a knowledge vasana usually are the people who realize and recognize. Because the people with this extroverting vasanas for experience, they very often, they remain caught up into this notion of the self as an object of experience, you know, and they develop usually big egos. Why? Because they feel that they are having extraordinary experience of the self. You know, I mean, every human being is ordinary jivas. They are having this ordinary experience of eating, sleeping, and you know, and going about to the office and doing the job. And I'm here having this incredible transcendental experience. What do you believe that happens to the ego of these people? Understand? They develop this specialty kind of ego, you know? and they are stuck in sattva, they are stuck in Anandamaya kosha. It may be a very dangerous state. People who have this vasana for this mystical experience, they are often in a very difficult position because it's very difficult to present knowledge to them. Instead, they have a huge investment. They invest in those experiences. They define themselves through those extraordinary transcendental experience, you know. All the best to Sylvia and her family, including you, as new roles are assumed to accommodate for the passing of a family matriarch, Dave. So those were the questions of Dave. If anybody has any comments or anybody has anything fresh we can explore.
Arlindo, I have a bit of a confusion.
Please.
I've heard Satsang spoken of as standing as awareness.
You heard who?
Satsang.
Okay, I don't know this folk.
That's a Ramana's book about seeing and looking, and
Yeah.
And I guess that's standing as awareness. And I'm wondering, so that's a state, although it can, in the moment, be stateless. It's only when the knowledge is extra firm that it stops being a state.
Well, the so-called yani or jivanmukta, it experiences his or her own state, mental state. Okay, so now the yani or jivanmukta go about one's day experiencing a better state of mind because now his mind is somewhat resolved by self-knowledge. But life is about experiencing the world through our intellect, our subtle body, which is a state. Everybody has a view of the world according to one's mental condition, you know. So the beauty of the world is in the eye of the beholder, like that saying says, you understand? So that is a state. But when Vedanta says make a standing awareness as awareness, we are talking about this knowledge which brings about a shift of identity as I am the body-mind complex to I am pure consciousness, pure limitless consciousness, free consciousness, pure limitless free consciousness. This shift is made out of knowledge and knowledge alone. You understand? And it's not a state, it's made out of knowledge and only knowledge. You understand it? But the moment that this click comes and one develops this doubtless conviction in regards to one's identity as consciousness, once that conviction, comes, this doubtless or doubt-free knowledge comes, one has a kind of impression that that my mental state is different now. You understand? So now I'm in the fourth state, the state of nirvana. So these are all misleading notions, conceptions, because the mind of the individual changes its atmosphere, its condition, and one experiences a more sattvic, mental environment, more balanced. So it gives us the impression that that enlightenment has an experiential element. And one time at the very beginning of my relationship with Ramji, I had this conversation with him because I was fighting a little bit the notion that self-knowledge is only about knowledge. And I was getting back to him and saying, no, there is something about experience because I can experience something different right now. And then I kept working on that until I understood, and I wrote back to him. I say, so this sense that I have that there is a certain experiential element to self-knowledge is there because there is not really an experiential element towards self-knowledge because it's only about knowledge, but it brings about a new experience in respect to the way you relate to the world. And I present to Ramji as saying it's a sense of experience which is nothing by a new experience of identity. It's an experience of identity. I'm having an experience of a different identity. And this identity as consciousness perceives, allows my ego, my intellect to perceive the world from the standpoint of this new identity, which is made out of knowledge, knowledge alone, and allows this ego, this body-mind complex, to experiencing, to relate to the world from this angle of self-knowledge. Self-knowledge made of knowledge alone, but all experience are made through the intellect of the ego. And this ego, who is now has the benefit of self-knowledge, is going to feel that now enlightenment has an experience filled to it, but it's just that my mind is now resolved by knowledge, by self-knowledge, and therefore it feels different. The world feels different, and not only you can even experientially sense that this light of consciousness is shining in your intellect at all times. You understand? The shining of consciousness, the shine that that all the time reflects in our intellect. It shines all the time. And there is a sense to that. People believe that when the mind is more sattvic, we can more easily apprehend this consciousness shining in the mind when the mind is sattvic, and we call that the reflection of consciousness in a sattvic mind is going to produce what we call samadhi or bliss or whatever, and it's a fact. But Yani can even experientially sense consciousness shine in its mind, in its own mind, when the mind is more rajasic. You can feel that, oh, consciousness, you are shining, and the equipment here now is a little bit disturbed, and look how confused I am. You understand? So he can sense the mind, the consciousness as this witnessing, non-experienced principle shining in the intellect at all times, regardless of the predominance of the gunas. You understand? So we can look at it experientially once this knowledge is firm. You understand? And it's clear.
So follow up and back a bit. So when you are having when you're experiencing the after effect of knowledge, kind of in a way, and then a disciple would be employing that discipline of bringing back the senses. Is that, I can't remember the Sanskrit term for it.
Yeah.
But one of those disciplines is controlling the senses.
Yeah.
So on a subtle level, is that the kind of discipline you have to do?
Yeah, it's important to do that. It's important to do that. It's most important to do it before self-knowledge, self-recognition. But after self-knowledge, you see, I tend to say that after self-recognition, the sadhana becomes much easier and effortless. Okay, because this recognition that I am consciousness allows this brightness of consciousness shine in your intellect, and every time that these impurities or these vanities or the arrogance comes up, it's easily seen by the intellect. You understand? So this discipline after the self-recognition is easier and more effortless, but still one has to be careful. That's why Ranji says, so even after you better keep your association with the scriptures and with our gurus, our teachers, because you want to be careful. Maya is very powerful. This ignorance is very deeply rooted in the collective consciousness or mind of media, you know. So it's more on those lines. And going back to what you said, making stand in awareness, in order for it not to be a dualistic kind of approach, it needs to be understood as I am awareness. Therefore, now I'm claiming my identity as awareness. Self-knowledge is nothing but it's a claiming. It's claiming what I am. You understand? It's not becoming, it's not accomplishing or getting, or it's claiming. So and this claiming is only possible when our doubts in respect to our identity have been cleared, or our certainty of I am the body mind have been dismantled, howsoever or how long it may take until I dismantle this misconception, yeah, in respect, which is the most not natural in the human phenomenon there is. Every human being feels like I am the body mind. So to dismantle this misconception, it takes what it takes. And then disclaiming, only then disclaiming my identity as consciousness becomes possible. You understand? Because I don't have those vasanas challenging the scriptures all the time. This resolution of doubts is just that Vedanta presents to us is a gift, because it allows us to keep resolving our doubts, our suspiciousness in respect to these declarations of the Upanishad. Because in the beginning we hear that, okay, you know, I don't trust these rishis very much, so we never know, you know, maybe they were smoking something or drinking some teas there that made them start tripping, you know. So these doubts, they need to be gradually erased, so that we developed one of these basic qualifications, which is trust and confidence in the scriptural knowledge. And then we can keep doing our work, intensify our efforts until our doubts are cleared.
It always comes down to knowledge and understanding.
Knowledge and understanding, and a value for knowledge. You see, the whole process of Vedanta is a process of converting a value for experience into a value for knowledge. Understand?
Values.
Value. So once we have this clear value properly developed for self-knowledge, and then everything becomes easier. You understand? But it needs to develop. So I keep doing this job. I was assigned to do this job of planting these seeds of knowledge. And now I met a larger group of people here in São Paulo. But I have no expectation, because I know that Maya or Vidya is a tough guy, you know. And people, they tend to go back to those pursuits of experience until the soil, this mental preparation, you know, is purified in a way that this understanding, this value for knowledge at the cost of experience develops, and then people start passing on, oh no, I'm not going to do this, I'm not going to do that, I'm going to stick to my Vedanta this Friday night, for example, this Wednesday afternoon, and so on, you know. It takes time to develop a value for knowledge. Well, we don't have any other better game. There is no better pursuit in life. If otherwise, how many we are? We are G7, G6, G8 today. So G8, let's see who is in here as well. Marlene, Karen, Claudia. There is somebody else? No. So otherwise, the 8 of us wouldn't be here. You know, we spend our time having this conversation. So we have a value for knowledge that will grow. In due time, it keeps growing until it becomes an intense desire, you know, to understand my true nature and claim my nature as limitless free consciousness.
That claiming, it's kind of like suicide for the jiva, right? It's that last act.
Yeah, but it is, but it is not. Once we understand that the jiva is just a misconception, the notion that I am the body and I am the mind is a misconception. Once we understand that the snake is a misapprehension, you understand? And then we don't have any problem to let go of this notion that there is a snake, you know? So once we understand that this ego is a source of suffering, which is fundamentally based on total ignorance, you know, of the nature of reality, once we understand that all suffering I have in life is due to this misconception in respect to my true identity, and then one is happily bringing this ego at the altar of Brahman or Ishvara or Dharma and say, hey, please, you know, erase this ignorance, erase this mistaken notion that I am this person with this history and so on. You know? So we are glad to get rid of it. And what are we going to lose with it? We're going to lose suffering. Who does not want to lose suffering in life? You know? Then everybody will be happy with such a deal. You know? And we don't become dysfunctional. And the ego remains, but it remains a wiser ego, you know. Here and there, he may, you know, have to be kept in its place and controlled and disciplined, and association with descriptions helps, and so on. But it's the best thing we can do to ourselves is to get rid of this ignorance, which is the ego, you know? Sense of I am in the body-mind complex. But we need to develop this value because otherwise we don't want to let go of all these connections that we have with these objects by which I define myself. We need to understand that I have only to gain, and first thing I need to let go of my entanglement with these objects that tied me to samsara and reinforce my identity as the body-mind. So this understanding keeps growing. And this intermediary stage is a little bit more scary of letting go of my connections with samsara, you know. This is a little bit more scary because you are not 100% sure that you're going to gain everything by letting go of everything, you know. I mean, that the world has to offer to us. You know. Right, Lucy? Do you agree? No? Hmm?
What I'm finding, Arlindo, on this journey is the ego plays a less and less important part as my knowledge of Vedanta increases.
Yeah.
The ego becomes less dominant in my life.
Yeah.
And it seems I'm just acting much more naturally without the ego wanting to co-opt life. And I guess when full realization finally happens, the ego then just accepts its place.
Yeah, and don't wait too much of that. Just
Its rightful place.
Claim your true nature and true identity as consciousness, you know, and that's it. You understand? I mean, but you can sense already, you know, this inner peace and satisfaction that comes with this understanding. You know, it comes gradually until it's somehow it's a doubtless understanding. Yeah. Very good. Okay, so we meet again next Monday. Good work we did today. And I will be sending today, tomorrow, the video of today and the last week that I end up forgetting to upload and send to you. Okay, I send both together. And we meet again next Monday. All right? Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Thank you, Lord. Thank you, my good friends, and we meet again soon again.
Thanks, Arlindo.
Thank you. Thank
Much
you.
love.
Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
Arlindo.
Bye.
You too.
Bye.